So this video is going to be sort of like a cheat sheet for those studying for the A+ certification exam, whether it's the 801 or the 802. I'm just going to go over some of the common information that's in these exams. As an A+ certified professional, you will troubleshoot a number of different problems on the system. So we're going to look at some of the popular utilities you might use to support or troubleshoot a system. For starters, we have CheckDisk, which the file name is chkdisk.exe, which checks your hard drive for problems with the file system and for bad sectors. The registry editor has a file name of regedit.exe, and with this utility you can make changes to registry values, and it can also be used to make selective backups. Prior to Windows XP, there were two editors, regedit.exe and regedt32.exe. The disk defragmenter utility has a file name of defrag.exe, and it's used from the command line or graphically through the Microsoft Management Console, or MMC, and dfrg.msc. Windows NT Backup has a file name of ntbackup.exe, and it allows you to back up files to tape or any writable file system. The System File Checker has a file name of sfc.exe, and it verifies that system files have not been modified, or if they have, replaces them with the original. It works with the hidden C/Windows/System32/DLL cache directory and the original operating system CD. The Task Manager has a file name of taskman.exe, and it allows you to see running programs and services, terminate problems, and view rudimentary performance information about the system. The Performance Console has a file name of perfmon.exe, and it allows you to view detailed performance information. The Dr. Watson utility has a file name of drwtsn32.exe, and it configures the level of logging you want to do when applications crash. And finally, you have the System Information utility, which allows you to view hardware and configuration information for your computer, and Event Viewer, which is the logging component of the operating system and the central location for all logging activity. Another term for the expansion slots on a computer's motherboard is bus slots. A number of different bus architectures have been developed over time. For the A+ exams, you need to be able to identify the differences between each of these bus architectures and know which ones are more popular today. The ISA has a bus width of 8 or 16 and a speed of 8 MHz. The MCA has a bus width of 32 and a speed of 10 MHz. The VLB has a bus width of 32 and is the speed of the local bus. And the EISA has a bus width of 32 and a speed of 8 MHz. The PCI has a bus width of 32 or 64 and a speed of 33 MHz. The AGP has a bus width of 32 and a 1x speed of 66 MHz, a 2x speed of 133 MHz, a 4x speed of 266 MHz, and an 8x speed of 533 MHz. In laptops, the PCMCIA has a bus width of 16 and a speed of 33 MHz. The PCI-X has a bus width of 32 or 64 and a speed of 66 or 133 or 266 or 533 MHz. The PCIe has a serial bus width, and for speed it uses multiple lanes, with each lane carrying 250 megabits per second. As an example, a PCIe by one slot can carry data at 250 megabits per second, while a PCIe by 4 slot can carry data at 1 gigabits per second. PCIe version 2 doubles those transfer rates. The most popular ports used today on the system are the USB and FireWire ports, which allow you to connect devices such as flash drives, digital cameras, and digital video cameras. We're going to compare features of the USB and FireWire, including the transfer rate and number of devices supported. USB 1 has a transfer rate of 12 megabits per second and supports up to 127 devices. USB 2 has a transfer rate of 480 megabits per second and also supports 127 devices. And finally, USB 3 has a transfer rate of 5 gigabits per second and also supports 127 devices. IEEE 1394 supports a transfer rate of 400 megabits per second, and it's also known as FireWire, and it supports 63 devices. IEEE 1394B has a transfer rate of 800 megabits per second, and it's also known as FireWire 800, and it also supports 63 devices. FireWire S1600 has a transfer rate of 1.6 gigabits per second and supports up to 63 devices. FireWire S3200 has a transfer rate of 3.2 gigabits per second and supports 63 devices. A redundant array of independent disks, or RAID, is a method of implementing redundancy, or duplicated information, on your hard drives. If one disk fails, the other disk, or disks, can provide the missing information. There are many different levels of RAID, but the following are the only RAID levels pertinent to the A+ exams. RAID 0 is disk striping, or a striped volume. With RAID level 0, the data is split across drives with no data redundancy. RAID level 0 improves read and write performance by writing to multiple drives at the same time. You need a minimum of 2 drives. RAID level 1 is disk mirroring or duplexing. It's a mirrored volume. With disk mirroring, the data is written to both drives involved in the mirror to provide data redundancy. Windows 7 supports disk mirroring. RAID level 5 is disk striping with parity, or a RAID 5 volume. With RAID 5 volumes, the data is written to multiple drives along with parity information that is used to help recover data if a single drive fails. RAID 5 volumes need a minimum of 3 disks. And finally, RAID 10 is mirrored disk striping. RAID level 10 is also known as RAID 1+0 because it is disk striping while mirroring the data written in the stripe. And as far as motherboard socket types and the CPUs they support, it comes down to Intel-based sockets and AMD-based sockets. And for Intel-based sockets, we have the LGA 775 socket, which was the only desktop or server socket used for many years by Intel, and thus just about every branded Intel CPU used it at one time or another. It supports Pentium 4, Celeron, Pentium 4 Extreme Edition, Core 2 Duo, Core 2 Quad, and Xeon. Socket LGA 1155 CPUs are based on Sandy Bridge or Ivy Bridge architecture, and they support Core i3 or i5 or i7, and Pentium, Celeron, and Xeon. Socket LGA 1156 CPUs are based on the pre-Sandy Bridge architecture, and they support the Core i3, i5, or i7, the Pentium, Celeron, and Xeon. The very first Core i7 processors used LGA 1366, so this supports Core i7, Xeon, and Celeron. And for AMD-based sockets, you had Socket 940, which had 940 pins and supported the Opteron and Athlon 64FX CPUs. You would usually find only an Opteron server-based CPU in a Socket 940. The Athlon 64FX was a super high-end CPU for its day, and it's unlikely to be on the exams. Socket AM2 also had 940 pins, but it supported the Athlon 64, Athlon 64X2, Athlon 64FX, Opteron, Sempron, and Phenom. AMD says that CPUs designed for AM2 sockets will work in a socket AM2 Plus and vice versa, though at the slower memory movement speeds of the AM2 component, which is the socket or CPU. Many manufacturers have not released motherboard updates that would enable support for a socket AM2 Plus CPU on a socket AM2 motherboard, thus making it impossible to upgrade just the CPU. Socket AM2 Plus also has 940 pins and supports the Athlon 64, Athlon 64X2, Athlon 2, Opteron, Phenom, and Phenom 2. Socket AM3 has 941 pins and supports Phenom 2, Athlon 2, Sempron, and Opteron CPUs. And though the names of some of the processors designed for Socket AM3 match the names of the CPUs designed for earlier sockets, they're not the same CPUs. They are specific to AM3 because they support different types of RAM, and just to make things even crazier, AM3 CPUs work just fine in Socket AM2 or AM2 Plus motherboards. Socket AM3 Plus has 942 pins and supports the FX CPU. And AMD has only released the FX branded CPUs that use the Bulldozer core. Motherboards with AM3 Plus sockets already available tout support for Phenom 2, Athlon 2, and Sempron CPUs in addition to the FX series. Socket FMI has 905 pins and supports the A CPU, and the A series features integrated GPUs and other chips. When problems arise on a Windows network, you can use the following utilities to do your troubleshooting. Having a clear understanding of all of them will help you on the A+ certification exams. ipconfig displays the basic TCP IP configuration, such as IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. ipconfig/all displays the TCP IP settings, including your media access control or MAC address, domain name system or DNS server, and lease information. ipconfig/release releases your IP address. ipconfig/renew renews your IP address. Ping followed by your IP address, or ping followed by your hostname, sends 4 test messages to the IP address or hostname you specify, or verify whether the other system is up and running. Netstat displays the TCP IP protocol statistics and connection information. It can be used to see who is connected to your system, what ports are open, and if you use a -O switch, what the process ID is of the program that opened the port. NBTstat troubleshoots the NetBIOS over TCP IP. For example, you can view a remote NetBIOS name table using NBTstat-A followed by the IP address. NSLookup troubleshoots DNS problems. You can get a listing for all the records in DNS using NSLookup. ARP troubleshoots the address resolution protocol. For example, you could use ARP-A to view your address resolution protocol cache. Task list allows you to view a list of running processes. Taskkill/PID followed by the process ID /F terminates a process when you supply the process ID. The traceroute utility shows the route that a packet takes to get to its destination. From a command line, type TRACERT followed by a space and an IP address or URL. The output describes the route from your machine to the destination machine, including all devices the packet passes through and how long each hop between devices takes. The traceroute command can come in handy when you have to troubleshoot bottlenecks. When users complain of difficulty reaching a particular destination by using TCP IP, you can run this utility to determine whether the problem exists on a machine or connection over which you have control, or if it is a problem on another machine or router. Similarly, if a destination is completely unreachable, traceroute can again determine whether the problem is on a machine or router over which you have control. One of the hardest tasks to perform when troubleshooting a system is fixing a system that will not boot. The A+ certification exams expect you to be comfortable with the different recovery tools available in Windows. So here are some of the popular recovery tools and where you can find them. The Recovery Console utility is the command line interface for troubleshooting disk issues and boot problems. To access it, you boot off the Windows installation CD or use the boot menu if pre-installed. Repair Mode provides access to the GUI and command line recovery tools, and to access it, you boot off the Vista installation CD. A restore point is a snapshot of a system's configuration, and it's used to revert the system state before a driver or software was installed. To access restore points from the Start menu, select All Programs, Accessories, System Tools, and then System Restore. Select Restore My Computer to an earlier time and click Next. Choose your desired restore point and click Next, and then click Next again. Windows will now boot to that restore point. Windows 7 and Vista allow you to boot your operating system to a restore point, which allows you to revert back to that system configuration. Very useful if your system has been hit with a virus. In order to boot to a restore point, you boot off the Windows 7 or Vista installation CD or DVD and choose Repair Your Computer, then System Restore from the System Recovery dialog box. You can also get to restore points through Safe Mode, which could prove useful if you have been hit with a virus and are unable to launch System Restore normally. Safe Mode loads the operating system with minimal drivers, and you access it via the Advanced Startup menu option, which is the F8 key. Last Known Good Configuration loads the configuration from the last time you successfully booted and logged on. And just like Safe Mode, you access it via the Advanced Startup menu option, which is accessed by pressing the F8 key before Windows starts up. Automatic System Recovery, or ASR, is an automated installation and restore of Windows. And to access it, you press F2 during boot up. Windows XP requires 4 core files to boot the computer. You'll need to understand what they are for the A+ exam. The 4 core files are NTLDR, which is the operating system loader code, boot.ini, which builds the operating system selection menu, ntdetect.com, which performs hardware detection, and nto.skrnl.exe, which is the core kernel code responsible for tasks such as thread management. Windows 7 and Windows Vista utilize 4 boot files, and you'll need an understanding of all 4 of them for the exam. So the 4 boot files for Windows 7 and Vista are bootmgr, which is the operating system loader code, similar to ntldr in previous versions of Windows. There's boot configuration database, or BCD, which builds the operating system selection menu, similar to boot.ini in Windows XP, but data resides in the BCD store. You can edit the boot configuration data with the BCD edit utility. There's winload.exe, which loads the Vista operating system if selected from the operating system selection menu provided by BCD, and finally winresume.exe, which resumes the Vista operating system if the system is started from a hibernate state. One of the most important skills to have as an A+ certified professional is the capability of securing Windows systems and networks. And even if you're not working in a networked environment, you can apply these same skills to your customers with home internet machines. So for starters, you're going to want to harden the operating system and uninstall any software you are not using and stop any services not being used. The more software that is running, the more potential security holes in a system. You're going to want to keep the operating systems and devices up to date with service packs and security patches. And also, you're going to want to ensure that there is a firewall between your system and the internet. A firewall prevents hackers from connecting to your system. Ensure that all user accounts use a strong password, which is at least 8 characters and uses a mix of uppercase and lowercase characters, numbers, and symbols. You're also going to want to enable auditing, which allows you to log any suspicious activity on the system so you're aware of it. Secure your wireless routers. If you have no need for wireless, disable this functionality on your wireless router. If you are using wireless, secure it by changing the SSID, disabling SSID broadcasting, and encrypting traffic with WEP, WPA, or WPA2, which is the best option. You should also secure the wireless router by setting a strong password for the admin account and disable DHCP on the router. You will then need to configure all your clients with static IP addresses. And finally, install antivirus software on all servers and client machines to help protect your systems from a virus. Make sure that your virus definition database is frequently updated. Each BIOS manufacturer has its own diagnostic codes that identify specific post errors. You need to consult the BIOS documentation for the diagnostic codes for your BIOS, but the general breakdown of the code categories is as follows. You have 100 to 199, which is a motherboard error, 200 to 299, which is a memory error, and 300 to 399, which is a keyboard error, 600 to 699 is a floppy drive error, 1400 to 1499 is a printer error, and finally 1700 to 1799 is usually a hard drive error. So now we're going to look at some recovery console commands. And the recovery console uses many of the commands that work in the Windows command line interface, as well as some commands uniquely its own. You have attrib, which is attrib, which changes the attributes of a selected file or folder. There's cd, or also chdir, which displays the current directory or changes directories. Checkdisk, which is chkdsk, runs the checkdisk utility. cls clears the screen. Copy copies from removable media to system folders on a hard disk. There's no wildcards. And del, or delete, deletes a service or folder. dir lists the contents of a selected directory on a system partition only. And disable disables a service or driver. Diskpart, that's diskpart, creates or deletes a partition. Enable enables a service or a driver. Extract extracts components from .cab files. Fixboot writes a new partition boot sector on a system partition. Fixmbr writes a new master boot record, or MBR, for a partition boot sector. Format formats the selected disk. List SVC lists all services on a system. Log on enables you to choose which Windows installation to log on to if you have more than one. Map displays the current drive letter mappings. MD, or mkdir, creates a directory. More, or type, displays contents of a text file. RD, or rmdir, removes a directory. REN, or rename, renames a single file. System root makes the current directory system the root of the drive you're logged onto. And type displays the contents of a text file. You'll also want to know about the boot REC command, which is a Windows Recovery Environment troubleshooting and repair tool that repairs the master boot record, boot sector, or BCD store. And this replaces the old fixboot and fixmbr recovery console commands and adds 2 more repair features. Boot REC/fixboot rebuilds the boot sector for the active system partition. Boot REC/fixmbr rebuilds the master boot record for the system partition. Boot REC/scanOS looks for Windows installations not currently in the BCD store and shows you the results without doing anything. Boot REC/rebuildmbr looks for Windows installations not currently in the BCD store and gives you the choice to add them to the BCD store. We're going to look at some application protocol port numbers. And so for our first application protocol, we're going to look at HTTP, which is for web pages, and the port number is 80. FTP, which is for file transfer, has a port number of either 20 or 21. SFTP is for secure file transfer and has a port number of 22. IMAP4 is for incoming email and has a port number of 143. POP3 is also for incoming email and has a port number of 110. SMTP is for outgoing email and has a port number of 25. Telnet is for terminal emulation and has a port number of 23. SSH is for encrypted terminal emulation and has a port number of 22. RDP is for remote desktop and has a port number of 3389. And finally, SIP is for voice over IP and has a port number of 5060. Contrast ratio is a value measuring the brightness of different colors, such as white versus black. The larger the ratio, the better the picture quality on the display. Most analog video signals are composed of red, green, and blue signals, which are typically delivered over either VGA or S-video connectors. However, some older high-end monitors may include 3 separate RCA connectors to deliver each signal over a unique or separate wire. The native resolution is the actual resolution of a monitor, as opposed to the display resolution, which may be set lower, which scales the image to the display area of the monitor. You can create a file in any folder on your hard drive by right-clicking in an empty area and choosing a document type from the New menu. Files can also be created from applications by choosing the application's Save feature. DXDiag is a troubleshooting utility for Windows that allows you to troubleshoot DirectX components on the system, such as driver version and settings. Grayware is a term used to describe software that performs unwanted actions. Grayware encompasses malicious software such as adware and spyware. Be sure to have a malware protection software loaded on your system to protect against forms of grayware. Spam is an unsolicited email message. Today's email servers are being hit with a wealth of unsolicited email messages every day from companies that are trying to sell services or products. Be sure to configure spam filters on your email servers and email clients. Media readers are popular add-on devices that allow you to read different types of memory cards and flash cards. Most systems today have media readers located on the front panel of the computer in place of a floppy drive. A KVM switch is a device that allows you to share a keyboard, video device, which can be a monitor, and mouse between several computers while being able to quickly switch between them. Resetting the page count is a troubleshooting tip for printers. If you find the printer reports low toner and you know there is more than enough toner available, then it could be that the printer is gauging the toner level by the number of pages printed. Find out how to reset the page count on your printer to get rid of the low toner error. Administrative shares are default shares on a Windows machine that allow an administrator to remotely connect to the machine, while a local share is any shared resource that the administrator has created. Examples of administrative shares are the root of each hard drive being shared as C or D and the Windows directory being shared as admin. Permission propagation is when you set permissions on a parent folder and you want those settings to apply to all the subfolders as well. To propagate the permissions to subfolders, you choose the Advanced button when setting NTFS permissions and choose to replace permission entries for all child objects. You may create trip hazards when doing things like testing a replacement network cable by using a network jack, which is further away, or laying out tools and computer components in a walkway by a desk. Always ensure that you are not needlessly risking the safety of yourself and others. Try to avoid trip hazards. Most computer equipment is light enough for a single person to handle, while many servers and UPSs will require 2 people to move or place in a server rack. Always ensure that you have help for these and other heavy items, and bend with your knees to prevent injury. As equipment is used, many components will build up heat, which can injure you. This is especially true of both computer and printer components. When servicing equipment, ensure that you exercise proper care when hot components are present. When troubleshooting system components, be aware of unexpected odors or smells that may lead you to the source of the problem or signal an immediate danger. For example, burn smells could identify overheating components or melted connectors. And for alerts, a function found within the performance monitor, which can be found at perfmon.msc, allows you to monitor performance counters and perform an action when the counters are beyond a desired threshold. The action could be logging in the event log, generating a network message, starting a performance data log, or running a custom command. The taskbar is the bar at the bottom of the Windows desktop, which displays the Start menu, all open applications and documents, and contains the system tray or sys tray. The sys tray, or system tray, is on the right side of the taskbar and displays many running processes, known as background processes, that run in the background but do not have a visual interface until you click on the icon in the system tray. Most of these processes are accessed by clicking or right-clicking on the icon in the system tray so that you can change settings of the running program or terminate the process by choosing Quit or Exit from the menu that appears. If there are too many items to display, they can be shown by clicking on an arrow on the left of the sys tray. And as far as the removal of peripherals, one of the processes in the sys tray is the Safely Remove Hardware tool. When you insert devices such as a USB flash drive, an icon appears in the sys tray for the removable hardware. By clicking on this icon, you will see a list of devices that can be stopped and safely removed when you are ready to unplug the device. And so I hope this video was helpful for some of you studying for the A+ certification exam, and good luck!